So hello back again. Thank you for joining us. We still cannot see you, but we know you're out there. We are now on main stage and having our fireside chat. I'm very happy and honored to have Professor Gabriele Anderst-Kotsis here from the Johannes Kepler University in Linz. She's an Austrian computer scientist, a full professor in computer science, teaching in Linz, leading the Department of Telecommunication and the Division of Cooperative Information Systems. We'll come to that, and I'll explain it a bit later. She was Vice Rector for Research and the Advancement of Women and long-standing chairwoman of Universities Austria's Policy Committee on Research. She's a distinguished member and elected, brackets incoming, as of 1st of July, president of the Association for Computer Machinery, ACM, and she's also president of the ASEA Uninet, we come to that as well, and past president of the Austrian Computer Association. She has several key achievements and rewards. I just mentioned two. One is ACM's Distinguished Scientist, and in Austria, most important, the Heinz Zemanek Prize or Heinz Zemanek Reward. She's, of course, actively teaching, despite all her other functions. There's a long list of publication seminars she led and where she had been speaking, all of that on her website, and we'll post a link, of course, for you to review. So thank you very much for joining us. And a good friend of mine mentioned that you are collecting elephants, so a broader elephant.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So you see, I've done a bit of research and got the right sources, I hope.
You got it, yes.
So, you know, by giving this brief introduction, that of course is very interesting to our audience. Our audience is a mixture of scientists from the IT, legal background, also practitioners, students, and of course they'd like to get to know you and what you do. And so I don't know whether you want to add something about you personally to what I've mentioned at the beginning, or whatever I missed.
First of all, I would like to thank you very much for this nice introduction. Hearing that I've done so much, I feel actually old.
Oh.
But you're absolutely right. I do have a pretty large elephant collection. This started many, many years ago. I think when I was age 14, I was imagining an elephant. So I was already at that time pretty much into the virtual worlds. Okay. Talking about my background, maybe it's worth to mention that I detected my passion for computer science quite late, because at high school I didn't have any computer education at all. I was not one of those nerds playing with the computer. I actually found my love for computer science during my fields of studies.
Okay, but you got a good education at university.
I did.
That is, the question is sort of for today's time, you know, whether or not that shouldn't be a bit different, but also that is probably something we can add on. But tell us first a bit about what is the Department of Telecooperation? What do you do there? What's this Division of Cooperative Information Systems?
Well, let me start with my broader environment.
Yeah.
As you said, I come from the Johannes Kepler University in Linz. We are a so-called comprehensive university, which means we are not specialized like the business university here, but we have a school of medicine, a school of law, a school of social sciences and economics, and the school of technical and natural sciences. And that's where my department belongs to. So we have the technical background, and telecooperation is one of the departments in the field of computer science. And the idea would be to focus on information and communication technologies, and we contribute mainly software to this field, supporting any form of cooperation, and the tele stands for bridging the gap in time and distance. So what we're actually doing quite now, we can't be at the same physical space, but we can meet in the virtual space. Some of us probably even can't meet at the same time, but I understand those talks will be recorded so people can view later on. I would say that at the moment we are pretty much advanced with those kind of technologies with respect to the traditional media, video and sound. But we do lack, of course, all the other aspects that enhance our human communication, like, for example, the feel of touch, the feel of smell, taste, whatever you could imagine in those areas, or the feel of kinesthetics. And this is also part of our research. So we want to investigate new innovative methods on how to better enhance our communication and our cooperation, and this applies to many, many different fields. My personal background is a rather technical one. I come from the field of distributed computing. So in the past, I was focusing on how to best connect and network computers, and now my interest has shifted to how to best connect and network humans by means of technology support.
So will we smell and taste?
Yes.
Okay.
There's already
On the
experimentation. Well, I think taste will be something probably more a future topic, because you don't really want to lick your iPhone to have any special experience. At least most people would not like to do this, I guess. But smell definitely is already frequently used. Just think about cinemas, which already use smell for enhanced experience, or in marketing, it's well used for many, many years. What we try to bring in is, again, the computer side, because current technologies are pretty much analog still. I mean, you can emit smell, you can spray the perfume to make the smell, but what we would like to do is to use this really as an additional sense. For example, there was one project, it was not our own, it was from a research group in Germany, and a couple lived separated, the researcher and his girlfriend, and he invented a distance communication. Whenever his girlfriend would enter her home, there would be her perfume sprayed into his office 100 kilometers away. Okay. So by just being there is no explicit communication needed, but implicitly you would feel the smell and you would feel connected. And those are things that we would be interested in.
Is cloud services important for that?
Definitely, yes. As an enabling infrastructure, this is one of the basics. So what I've described just now is the application side, but of course we are also pretty much interested in how to best support those kind of communication services, and cloud technologies, cloud infrastructure is a key element there, yes.
And privacy on the other side?
Yeah, that's a big topic as well. I have to admit that's not really a field of expertise for me personally. I'm really more into this aspect of communication and cooperation. But of course, you can't discuss those fields without privacy. It's always a giving and taking. If you want to have better services, you need to tell the system about yourself. So you need to disclose some parts and you need to tell other parts. But we will, I think, also come to that later on. I think the most important thing, both for the educated user, the experts, as well as the uneducated users, is being aware of what kind of information we do share. So,
by still sticking to Johannes Kepler University and your activity there, what are your current research topics? What's your teaching focus?
Let me start with teaching, because this is a little bit more traditional. I'm teaching in the Bachelor Multimedia Systems, and what I said at the beginning, this still pretty much is the standard communication media, like text, video, audio, and images. But I try also to bring in the higher studies those novel types of interaction that I just mentioned. So this is one area of teaching. Then we offer courses in mobile computing, because communication is omnipresent, is everywhere. We need to be connected, or we are connected also in a mobile world. So this is some other field of expertise that I'm working on. And then this is a little bit of a hobby which I started also during my PhD thesis, and then also later on in my habilitation work. I'm interested not only in designing those systems, but I'm also interested in quantitative and qualitative evaluation, which means how fast are the systems, how performant are they, but also how good are they from an end user perspective. So I also teach this kind of performance evaluation techniques and performance management techniques. For research, everything that has to do with this field of telecooperation. In the past years, there has been a focus which is gaining now special interest because of the current situation that we're in. A couple of years ago, I started together with some PhD students to work on special collaboration scenarios. We are pretty good in supporting collaborating groups that physically share a meeting. We have those whiteboard technologies, blah, 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 protocols, automated meeting taking, etc. We have pretty advanced technologies for setting like that, combining a group of people virtually. What we do lack is the interplay between the different collaboration scenarios. So, for example, one PhD thesis that I recently supervised that was completed was dealing with ex situ and in situ collaboration. Mm-hmm. So you share your collaboration on site, then you have remote phases, and how to stay connected in that. Another ongoing thesis is hybrid collaboration. This is actually what we are doing right now. We can see each other physically, yes, but we don't see our audience. And these are the most difficult situations at the moment. I think all of you are participating in virtual meetings now, and you probably will share this feeling that especially this hybrid collaboration is difficult to maintain. We do not have appropriate technology support for those kind of meetings to best integrate all the participants in those hybrid meetings. And another thesis that I recently supervised that was completed was trying to integrate traditional media in the traditional sense of media, like for example TV, mm-hmm, with the new collaborative technologies, or not so new anymore, that we know, for example, from the World Wide Web and all those social media. So a PhD student of mine was developing a technical framework that would allow you to add services into a TV stream for collaboration. So she was providing the technical infrastructure, and a startup has cut up the idea, and you could now integrate with your mobile phone, with your TV, and try to share content, try to collaborate. And maybe you will see these results of this thesis in a couple of years as a product. I would hope so.
And I also read that you are dealing with IoT,
yes,
and sensors and,
yes,
and gadgets.
Yeah. I have to admit I'm really fond of technology. So we do not build the hardware. We are using those mm-hmm, kind of technologies to build applications on top. Mm-hmm. And as I said before, in this example of the smell, if you want to design such services, it's also important that the technology, the IT system, is aware of the environment. Because I think we do see a shift of the users entering explicit commands into the computer towards more implicit interaction. Mm-hmm. The system tries to recognize what would I like to do, and therefore provides the appropriate support. And in order to recognize, of course, there needs to be a lot of sensor technology, there needs to be smart things, there need to be connected things that can also talk to each other.
How, for this sort of more personal interaction, would you sort of, how do you get all the sensors connected and then at the same time, or whatever, communicated then to the individual? Is that easily done?
No, not at all. This is not at all easily done, because also in this field we still have a lack of standard, a lack of interfaces. Things don't really communicate very well with each other, and there's also a big scalability issue. It mm-hmm, works fine if we do a small laboratory experiment, if we experiment in a PhD thesis with a setting of 5, 10, 20 devices, but if you really want to scale this up to millions of devices mm-hmm, worldwide, this is still a big problem. We have been involved in an EU project proposal for one of those knowledge and innovation centers a couple of years ago, and the idea there would have been exactly how to share and integrate all those kind of data sources European-wide, or maybe even hopefully worldwide. Unfortunately, the project was not funded, so we couldn't convince the European Union that this would really truly be a topic where Europe could have an added value against those dominating, US dominating companies.
To make a sidestep, we have now, sort of on the legal side, we have these court hearings virtually, mm-hmm, and then mm-hmm, you might have a witness sort of somewhere else. And usually when you have a witness in the courtroom and sit opposite, you get a sort of sense and feel when it is uncomfortable, or where it's right or wrong. In a distance, such sensors might help. The question is, what's the margin of error of such a device?
There is already pretty good recognition accuracy with respect to stress levels. This is, for example, used in a different field. I have to say I have not been working so much in the legal domain as application domain, but I do have a collaboration with the TH Ingolstadt, a former colleague of mine moved there, and here they are working on autonomous driving technologies. Mm-hmm. And for example, in the automotive industry, you could sense from the resistance sensors of your skin how stressed the driver is. And this is on the wheel. Yes, mm-hmm, you touch the wheel. In the wheel, there are the drivers, mm-hmm, the sensors, and you can recognize, okay, there's now a little bit of sweat or the changes in the electric resistance, and you can estimate from that pretty much.
So somehow that
technically it could be possible. The question is whether your witnesses would be willing to undergo such tests. And so again, the acceptance level is difficult, but from an accuracy side point of view, it is quite good. I still would not fully rely those kind of technologies. You probably remember this science fiction movie with the precogs where they're trying to detect crimes in advance and you would be sentenced just because the system would guess that you are going to predict the crime. I think this is a vision that we don't want to have.
No, absolutely not. No, it is just to get a feel of where technology would move us.
Technology is actually pretty fast. There is also an EU project where I was a reviewer, and what they were working on was trying to recognize the emotion of humans just from facial recognition. So the experiment was they would have a computer counterpart which would react to the emotions of the human being. And they did several tests, and again, also there was a quite high precision and accuracy in detecting the emotional state.
Okay, so
we are pretty
lots
fast.
to be seen.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
So going forward for the future research, what would you think is sort of challenging for you, what you would like to
I think I would like to continue this work in the new ways of collaboration, actually, because I think there's really a lot of potential, and I would really like to bring some of those research works to the market. This is one of the objectives that I have not achieved in the past so far. I think technology is now quite mature, and I think that would be really
Is there an environment at the university that you support startups?
There is a little bit at the university, but there is a lot in Upper Austria.
Okay.
So we do have incubator programs, we do have tech2B, technology to business, and they give a lot of support. We do have a little bit at the university. While I was a vice rector, I was promoting this also as well. So we do have, for example, an inventors program where patenting would be supported, and we do also have an interesting, as I said, we have a comprehensive university. So one of the experiments that we did, or one of the projects we did, was we were trying to combine students from the technical subjects with students from business economics and law, and trying to elaborate on a business plan in a seminar and things like that. It's difficult because at the end of the seminar, the different disciplines started to being able to talk to each other. So the progress is slow, but yeah, it's interesting.
But that gets me to you studied business informatics, which is a mixture between informatics, and there's also some, the objective to get involved with business. Would you see that as a suitable approach to education generally, this mixing disciplines?
Definitely, yes. I mean, for me, it was more or less by chance that I've chosen this subject, because initially I wanted to study, how was it called? Social statistics, but it was an experimental program that was terminated, and they were recommending to me to do business informatics, and I was first skeptical because I thought, well, informatics without any background knowledge, but then during my studies I decided that the informatics side is the one that is fascinating to me, and I think it influenced my type of research a lot, because I always do consider the business perspective. As you said, we have business courses. I do consider the societal impacts, because we also had lectures in society and IT. And I do also have a little bit of background in law and legal studies, although I have to admit this was one of the few exams where I failed. Because I noticed later that actually studying law is also very algorithmic, but the way I learned it was not that way. I was rather having the wrong approach. Well, I blame on me. I would not blame my past teachers.
But on the other hand, right, we have lots of people in the audience who ask the question, should I learn to code, or would it help me to understand to code, or what would you think is such a mixed study that brings in at least some understanding?
I think it's definitely worth the additional effort, because computers are powerful tools, and if you don't know how to operate those tools, how to instruct them, you cannot expand your full potential. I mean, there are different ways of using computers. You could just use them in a way that they are provided to the end user, and we try to improve this so that it's even easier to use the computer without coding knowledge. But still, if you have some basic understanding how computer programs work, you better understand also the mistakes that sometimes happen. So I would definitely be in favor of that. It's not necessary that you become a guru in one or the other language. The choice of language is probably not that important, but some ideas on how to really tell the machine what to do is also a very rewarding experience. You master the computer. I mean, you know it by yourself.
Sure.
You have some experience in that direction. So the first computer program, and even if it's only hello world, is amazing. You type something and then the system does exactly what you instruct it to do, and not just a few mouse clicks. It's really coding, and this is great.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. On the other hand, sort of, my personal thought is, as you said, law is a bit algorithmic. It follows logic in a way. Programming follows logic.
Yes.
There's something in between. There's I don't know whether you know that there's a program called Flogorithm, which helps you to flowchart. And by flowcharting, actually the program has an output in 16 different computer languages and provides you the code for what you flowcharted. So I always thought at least flowcharting is something people should try to learn. Is flowcharting actually part of education for informatics still, or I'm so much off the
No, it is still, especially in the variations that are offered by UML. So there are still flowchart-like techniques. It's not the traditional flowchart. The boxes and the arcs have special semantics, but we do use, of course, those kind of techniques, definitely. Although I have to say that education at the university tries to stay usually at a more abstract level and not to focus too much on specific techniques and tools.
But generally, sort of, as you have this background, you've done this business informatics study, would you think that basic skills are relatively easy to master? Is it something, if you study law and let's say you have a 1 year additional informatics, would you think some basics can be learned in a year?
Even less. I think if you really dig into the topic, and there are some programming languages, some coding approaches that really allows for very easy access. So I would, for example, mention scripting-like languages, and also some of the languages that are used now in programming. Artificial intelligence can quite easily and quickly be understood so that you can see fast results. I would say it's probably a little bit, I even will call it dangerous. It's probably not the easiest way, or dangerous to try to do it on your own without any instructor, because you easily can get lost. You can get lost in very, very much details, and so it's really a good idea to take some kind of online course. There are multiple tutorials available. Maybe you would like to start with doing a small program for your mobile phone, and then just program your first small app. And this, I would guess, even for a person without any deep-going IT background could develop a small program in one of those scripting languages within 1 week or so. Depends on how much
That's
time
quick.
you invest. Oh, we had an experiment. We had a workshop for teachers, and we tried to teach them mobile code development, and they had a little bit, of course, background. They were able to use the mobile phone, and that's enough. And there is some visual programming interface, and within 2 hours they were able to create a small game.
Right. Yeah, these visual interfaces are great. Now, sort of what I see in practice is there are, we have a senior partner who is now in his 80s, but he started to use a computer, I don't know, 20 years ago, and so when he was 60-something, and it is still, he didn't have any fear, and it was easy to master. And on the other hand, I see people who struggle to get the machine up and running. Is there something like, do you need a talent to, or is it, or just shouldn't you be not afraid?
I think this latter, you should not be afraid. I have a similar experience with my parents, because when I moved to Copenhagen, I had a visiting professor position there. They wanted to stay in contact with me, and this was in 2001. Making a phone call was difficult and expensive, so we decided we need a computer, and I installed the parents' computer at their home, and they were at that time at age 70++, and they learned how to do video conferencing with me. So we used Skype at that time, and it worked perfectly well. They had a strong motivation. Right. So either you need curiosity, motivation, and then it works. And
so could the message to the sort of people out there who are probably anyway in the younger years be sort of, don't be afraid, be interested, and you'll get on with this computer? Be
interested. I think that's the most important message. You really should have a goal. You should have something that you would like to achieve with the technology. For me personally, I always find it difficult learning something where I'm not sure if I would ever use it. I mean, that's probably true for most of the people on the world. But if you really have a motivation, if you want to have some process that you would like to automate, if you want to understand something, if you have this motivation, then I would say more or less everything is possible. Apart from the really creative things like playing music, I think you really need a talent there. But for coding, for basic levels, everybody can do that.
I can only agree. Now you have been a past president of the Austrian Computer Association, and the Computer Association has this driver's license for kids,
Yes.
for educating. Why isn't that more actively promoted in schooling and also in other studies than informatics? You know, why isn't the digitalization getting to the you're a vice rector? Why isn't it not getting more to universities? Why is it not more present?
I would say if you talk, for example, about the ECDL, I would say that it should be at school level, really, because this is the digital literacy. People need to learn how to do basic things with the computer. You know, the ECDL is basically text processing and the really basic things. This is similar compared to being able to read and write and do some simple calculations, also the computer. So I think this is something that should not be a topic at the university level. This is really basics. And I think the Austrian Computer Society has done a lot of advancement in that field. So at most of the schools, the ECDL is now included in their programs. The downside is, on the other hand, that some of the teachers say, okay, we do this, and that's the whole of the education in informatics. That's not enough, because this is very different from informatics, from computer science. This is the basics. Then there's this new trend at school level where our current government is also promoting pretty much the digitalization in terms of advanced digital competencies, like, for example, if I call the first one computer literacy, being able to talk to the computer, then the next level would be understanding what does it mean to be in social media, what could you do, what should you do, what shouldn't you do, so things like that. And then if it comes to the university, I fully agree, and I would really love to see some basics of algorithmic principles in all the curricula. The problem is that all our curricula are very limited with respect to the space. So you know this scheme, we moved to the ECDS, and apparently the best measure for performance at the university is ECDS per semester. The more you do, the better you are, and I hate this. If you follow this principle, this means that the students just do the mainstream and they try to finish their study program in the minimum amount of time. If you follow this principle, and fortunately there is a current trend towards this, the indicators that we are evaluated by the outside pretty much go in this direction, there is no room for additional education. My vision would be that the students would have time during their academic years not only to focus on the subject that they have chosen, but to broaden really the horizon. I mean, that's a great time being at the university and being able to look into different subjects. I mean, I was lucky enough to really study this business informatics, so I had quite a broad education. But in other subjects, you do have elective courses, right? You can choose some courses. But I really would like to expand those fields, and I really would love to bring in more computer science at the university level. But it's a slow process, and of course, if you want, or if you have to stick in the total number of ECDS, which are defined by law, a curriculum must have 150 ECDS, and if you want to bring in mandatory computer science or algorithmic thinking or whatever, you have to kick out some other parts, and nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that. But I need us to try then to follow the questions here, which
Yeah,
will come in. But sort of we will still like to stick to this schedule, which is when you now move on and think about the importance of informatics for us, for our generation and the next generation, is, you know, there's this sense the computer is taking over. In a way. And people, and in particular in the legal field, we have this discussion that on the one hand, people out there and say AI will predict, you know, how people behave in future, whether or not they can be released from prison and will be good people or bad people, down to whether or not the computer can be a judge or something. So things, I personally think, you know, in generations we won't see to come in terms of a proper performance, and all the systems that are out there, they have their faults in a way. But in a more general terms, taking it away from the legal field, you know, how strong will the computer influence our lives? Is you know.
But there is no doubt about the omnipresence of computers.
Right.
Just if you look into this room, there are many computer technology, and we would not be able to do this without computer technology. So the omnipresence is a fact. I never support a statement like computers taking over, because for me always the computer stays a tool, or the related technology. It's a tool.
Right.
And now I would like to connect to the previous question. If we as humans are not able to master this tool, then we are at risk.
Right.
Because any tool that you cannot master can become dangerous. So again, education is the key to the successful future integration of computers. I would say that we really must convince the students, we really must convince the next generations that designing IT is one of the most rewarding, important professions that we will have in the future. Because you're right, the introduction of technology will influence our ways of living, and we must make sure that it's not the computer dominating the process, but supporting the process. So we should design the process, we should design what we would like to do with the tools, and the tools should follow our needs. And I think I'm also working a little bit in this communication aspect, of course, in the field of human-computer interaction. And there the field has made a remarkable transition during the past 30 years. In the past, actually the field was called initially computer-human interaction. The biggest conference is still called CHI. The computer was in the center. And nowadays the human is in the center. You have been using computers in the early days, and really the human had to learn the language of the computer. And nowadays we have means that computers better understand our human language, starting from NLP and techniques like that. And I think this needs to be true not only for the direct interaction between human and computers, but also for the usage of computers in general.
I saw an interview you gave, and there was this issue coming back to autonomous driving, right? Computer is probably very well advanced already to drive.
Yeah.
And then there is this issue of decision making,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
In a difficult situation,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So how far is technology? How, what level of driving can we really achieve?
Yeah.
And will it ever get to decision making levels? Maybe the better decision for the computer, because quicker, more
This is
calculated?
a very, very interesting field that I love to discuss, because it's really not only addressing the technical issues, but as you said, also legal issues and other dimensions. Already with the current technology, autonomous driving would work perfectly well if all vehicles would be autonomously driven. Because then the technology would know what are the other partners in the traffic situation and could exactly predict their behavior. As long as there is a mixture between humans and machines, there will always be a problem. And especially this transition period will be very, very difficult. Currently, autonomous driving is not allowed. But the next step that they are envisioned is also a very dangerous one, because let's imagine the situation what they're currently discussing is one of the solutions. Okay, the car can drive autonomously, but in any critical situation it must be the human who reacts and decides. Okay, so let's think about that. We live with this for a couple of years. This means we will have people who usually are driven by their car, they are just maybe already doing something different, and they will not be experienced drivers, because most of the time they will be passengers. And then there's suddenly a critical situation, and now they have to react.
Yep.
So I think especially this transition period will be very, very difficult. The only solution probably could be to say from one day to the other we completely move towards autonomous driving. You're not allowed to drive on your own anymore. But the mixture period really will be difficult. I have to say this is a field that is also for me personally of high interest, because I hate driving by myself, so I pretty much would love to have autonomous driving. But on the other hand, I have to admit that I love fast cars, which is somehow a contradiction. I love to be the passenger with a good driver, so I love to be driven. So if the cars would really drive like some humans, not boring way of driving, but the more inspiring way of driving, that really would be fun. But this is just a vision that I have. So coming back from the field of autonomous driving to the basic question of who should make the decision. In general, I would say that there always must be the possibility for human intervention. I would not be happy in a situation where all the decisions are completely left to the users. Autonomous driving, as I said before, could be a special case that worked well if everything would switch to autonomous, because the decisions we take there are usually not that critical. But again, you could imagine very harsh exceptions. I just remembered from the previous discussion there was a very interesting and moving case with this corona that has just been discussed and mentioned. But also for driving, you could imagine a situation where you as a human driver, let's assume you're sitting here and you have your husband next to you, you're driving, and you come to a situation where an accident is unavoidable. And the only choice you can make is hurt yourself or hurt your side passenger. You as a human being can decide. A machine will never be able to do this decision, wouldn't it?
I don't know. It's difficult to say, because I think you made a very good point that when you are driving, you would not be focused. And then you're forced to take a decision, but that is something where time is of essence, and you don't have the parameters that are relevant for the decision because you haven't paid attention. Whereas the machine would have the parameters, but couldn't communicate probably those. So.
No, but actually my colleagues from the TH Ingolstadt, they are actually doing research on that, how to do the best way to hand over. For example, what they are interested in is they want to investigate what kind of side tasks are acceptable during driving. How much distraction would autonomous driving be allowed to support? And this might be one approach, that you say, for example, okay, I do allow, for example, at the moment the passenger to relax a little bit, but I would not allow the passenger to read or write. And in some other situations, if it's predicted, non-critical for a while, you might even be allowed to do different tasks. And they are doing experiments. How quickly are humans in doing this handover? How dangerous is it? They are doing this with driving simulators, which of course is only partially realistic, because if you know that your life is not truly at risk, you might even behave different. But they have some interesting results, and this is definitely a topic of pretty much interest in the research community.
On the legal side, we have this problem. Let's stick with this example, right? If there is an accident and the computer or the car algorithm is responsible, who is actually liable, right? The person operating the car, the producer of the car, the producer of the software.
I have no answer to that, but it's definitely an important question. I remember, I think this was 15 years ago. I was a reviewer for an EU project, and it was about a parking system. Users would drive, we had a site visit in Brussels, users would drive to Brussels, and then they would like to park their car, and the system would automatically suggest a park house and would, on the navigation system, direct the user there. The user would enter, and then in the demo, the user was pressing the button to open the door and to enter. And I was criticizing this. I was saying, you're doing so much automatically, why would the user need to press the button? And they said, because it's a legal requirement that we need explicit user interaction for making the contract between the parking house and the user. At that moment, it cannot be digital, it cannot be just by consent. By being there, I would like to enter, but there really needs to be this explicit content. So sometimes legal restrictions have an interesting influence, yes.
Now we are somehow in this area of artificial intelligence now, and sort of in order to also get on with our interview, but I'd like to culminate this a bit and ask you to speak about sort of, to our audience, artificial intelligence is something, intelligent, the intelligent machine. Is there an intelligent machine, or is it still one and one?
It is still 0 and 1, but it's mimicking some kind of intelligence pretty well. So there have been significant advances in fields that were formerly typical human domains. So as human beings, we are very good in detecting similarities very quickly. If you have a small kid and you tell the kid, point at everything that is shaped like a circle, the kid will very quickly be able to do this. For a machine, such a task is very hard to learn. Machines are good at number crunching, they can process large amounts of data, they can process data at a high speed. And everything that's more related towards creativity or abstraction is rather good at humans. And now we see the tendency with those new methods in machine learning and deep learning that computers are coming into those domains. I still would not call them really intelligence, because for me intelligence is much more. It's emotional intelligence, creativity. It might look like those techniques are also having some kind of creativity, but they work by observing many, many data from the past and predict the future. And this works surprisingly well. But human mankind would not be at this level if we only had been learning from the past and predicting this to the future. We need innovation, we need radical changes, and all those are things that machines are still very, very poor at. So this is...
Is it fair to say most of artificial intelligence software is still statistical software?
It depends on how you define statistical. Statistical software. No, I think it is different, yes. It's not just the traditional way of statistics that we know, because for me, statistics has a pretty transparent correlation between data in and results out. And with those techniques from machine learning, from neural networks, it's data in, magic to most of the people, and then out. So even experts in machine learning cannot really sometimes explain how the results are obtained. The machine can give some justification, but it's not always really possible then anymore to really do a tracing, do a backtracking, and to detect those kind of dependencies.
Is that because the database is changing because the machine adds data to the basis itself, or because the algorithm
I would
as
say
such
it's more
should
the
be
data processing, yes.
data processing.
Changing, modifying the data, combining them in a different way that is no longer transparent to the outside.
Which brings us to the other problem, right? If you go back to law, of course, it needs to be predictable. It needs to be explainable. We speak about explainable AI, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's currently a trend of trying to solve everything with artificial intelligence. You put your data in, and then you turn around on a few parameters, and then you get really amazing, surprising results. But I'm coming from a field, I told you before, I've been working on performance evaluation, where we do believe a lot in models. So if you know about your domain, if you have this domain knowledge, why would you throw away all this domain knowledge? And I think in the legal domain, you have a lot of knowledge, you have a lot of structures, you have a lot of experience that you would like to bring in, and maybe this could be a future direction also for artificial intelligence, which is not my core field of research, but trying to combine those model-based approaches with those learning approaches. I think there would be really potential for the future.
Right. Now, let's move on to different topics. You are incoming president of ACM.
Yes.
Tell us, what is ACM?
Yeah, you mentioned it. It's the Association for Computing Machinery. It was founded many, many years ago. I probably should know as a president the exact year, but I don't know yet, right after the Second World War. And the idea was to have a worldwide platform of professionals in computing machinery at that time. So to say, they really wanted to have a common voice, they wanted to share their problems. The Austrian Computer Society, in contrast, was more founded with promoting technology to the public, to the society. ACM was more really founded as a professional union. The members of ACM are the individuals who work in IT, who are interested in IT. It's quite an open association. We currently have something like 100,000 members worldwide. Many of them are coming from academia, many are students, many are professionals, but some are not working in IT but just interested. So it's really an open organization. ACM is therefore also offering a lot of services for the community. Like, for example, if you want to do research, you have access to the so-called digital library. ACM is organizing conferences. ACM allows you to build special interest groups for different kind of subjects, thematic areas that you're interested in. Recently, and if I say recently, I mean, we are a young discipline, recently, let's say in the last 10 years or so, ACM is also trying to bring more of its results to the public. So, for example, ACM has founded technical policy committees, which try to influence, at least to inform decision makers outside IT. So, for example, there is a special Europe Technical Policy Committee And the Europe TPC recently launched, I would say, a very good statement about what kind of criteria should those tracking apps have in order to be technically sound, societally acceptable, legally acceptable, etc. So they are trying now more and more to bring the results also to the public.
So I would think as IT services is a very broad field, there are subsections.
Yes. Yeah. So the structure is a little bit complex. The most important sections are those special interest groups. The abbreviation is SIC. There, for example, special interest groups I mentioned before, SIC-Chi and computer-human interaction. There's, of course, a SIC on artificial intelligence, but there are also SICs that might be of interest to a broader audience, like there is a special interest group on computers and society, and there are many dealing with data processing, information retrieval, where they connect to many, many different application domains.
The obvious question for me now is the one for law and technology?
I checked, not yet.
So,
not yet.
So we probably can give an impetus. Of,
yes, it's possible actually. Apart from the 6, there are also so-called chapters. The chapters are usually regional aggregations. So, for example, there's a German chapter of ACM which unites the German research community. In Austria, we didn't have this because we have the Austrian Computer Society, which is associated with ACM, so we didn't decide to go for a chapter. And with connections from and support from the chapters, there still might be interest in joining a SIG. I mean, what needs to be done is you need to find a group of people interested in starting this. ACM is a volunteering organization. They would not provide you with officers doing the work. It should be the community.
And sort of, now you are incoming president, what will be, what's your objective? What do you want to achieve?
I really want to emphasize the aspect of ACM being a global organization because, to be honest, it has been dominated by the US pretty much in the past. So most of the past presidents were Americans. There was one British, and I'm the first non-Anglo-American president. I'm the first one from continental Europe. So this global aspect is one thing. And in this position, I think ACM is also very much capable of moving more into this direction of providing solutions. So in my statement that I wrote last year in October or so, I was focusing on 3 thematic areas. I would say that ACM should promote computing machinery. I use this term because I think it's really broad and comprehensive for fighting the CO2 dilemma, the climate crisis. Fertilizing medical research, which is very up-to-date right now, and fertilizing also all fields of healthcare where technology can provide a lot. I mean, just if you think about medical research, some of the research methods that are possible now would not have been possible without a computer. We can analyze now massive amount of data. The whole field of bioinformatics has evolved. So this is opening a lot of new research methods. And the last one, which I think is also very important, we should really try to put the focus on protecting democracy. ICT in the past has enabled a lot of participation for the public, but we must ensure that this is maintained, this is protected.
Is this a policy issue? Or?
It is not only a policy issue, it starts from very basic issues of just access to information. If we design technologies in a way that it's not accessible for all, and with accessibility I mean for people with special needs, for example, for people in rural areas who don't have a good internet connection, who don't have physical access to the information, then we are actually achieving quite the opposite. We are not protecting democracy, we are hindering democracy. Because if this is becoming the dominant way to express your opinion, to get informed, and you don't have access in an appropriate way to this kind of information, this is very dangerous.
And how would ACM contribute in that context? Is it lobbying or information? Or?
Lobbying could be something, but really providing practical help. For example, there has been a big program in India with support from ACM in developing education at schools, in building up infrastructure, so ACM is really also providing practical support. I mean, we cannot give financial support, we are a non-profit organization, we cannot fund this. But as you said, we can do lobbying, we can support initiatives, we can communicate the results. That's what ACM can do in that respect.
So a big organization, a lot of things to achieve there. One of the issues I've seen in the past years there are also big organizations in the area of IT security, like Is Acm or Square, which are Austrian. And is that something that is relevant for ACM as well, or is that separate?
No, it's not separate at all, no. Those organizations are cooperating with each other, okay. So it's not that they are isolated. I would say the strength of ACM really is that it's not specialized for one specific branch of computer science. We have been discussing before how broad the topic is, so really ACM is the general umbrella, and of course then for special topics we are cooperating with all those other organizations, yes.
Do you think that, on one hand you said cloud computing is very important. Let's leave aside the privacy side. Are people enough aware of the security issues? And what could we do? What can ACM do? What can universities do to improve on that?
Yeah. Again, I think informing the people, showing the risks, but also showing the potentials. And I think that's something that definitely ACM can and will do in the future. So far, ACM has not really been focusing on the general public so much. So our target audience is on the one hand the professionals, the scientific community. We moved in the past years to the politicians, to the decision makers. But I think we need structures to really get to the people on the street and to also disseminate information there. And I would say the role of ACM there again could be the umbrella, because ACM doesn't have the power to tell the Austrian population about security issues. But they could, for example, work together with the Austrian Computer Society, which then has much better means. So it could work as an facilitator, providing the basic information, providing, for example, a lot of webinars. Which are, at the moment, as I said, pretty much dedicated towards the professional and scientific community, but in the future you could imagine that the members of ACM also contribute webinars telling about those topics in a way which is understandable by everybody.
As a professor and as somebody who knows the market and practical applications, do you think people have enough understanding of IT security? Is that something that is arriving at, everybody has 2 or 3 gadgets today, is using endless applications.
I do see some interesting discrepancy. Because on the one hand, everybody is pretty much concerned about security, and everybody has the feeling that the data, the traces, the digital traces we leave will be exploited by the companies, and the news report terrible cases from time to time. So this is one side of the coin. People really like to have their data, the information about themselves protected, and they do not trust the systems.
Correct.
One solution to that would be to create more transparency, and we tried to do something in this direction with the GDPR and those kind of regulations, but still people don't know how to execute this. So I would say that the legal framework is quite fine, but you as an individual would not really know how to benefit from this. I think only a few people really would like to ask about the data that are stored about themselves.
But that's sort of on the GDPR side, but what about security in terms of you're getting hacked or you're
okay, yeah, you mean this aspect of security. How should I phrase it? I say it directly. You're not worried at all until it happens to you.
Yeah.
And once it happened to you, you become very, very alerted. So even being a computer professional, I have to say by myself, I was not very careful about doing a backup of my data. And then it was not a hacker attack, it was a simple crash of my disk and I lost some data. And since then, I'm doing regular backup. So maybe it's like you can tell your kids 100 times, don't touch the hot plate, and they have to.
and do you think education would help here, or information would help here? Or do you need to experience it on the hard way?
Probably to some extent you need to experience it on the hard way, but it would be good if there would be some hidden net that you're not aware of. So what's, for example, very helpful, and I think this is done frequently in companies, not so much at the private level, that security companies send hackers to the company and show them how vulnerable they are. And maybe something like that could be also interesting in the private life. So we offer a lot of computer courses for people trying to learn how to master the technology. And maybe it would be interesting to show them how vulnerable is your own computer.
And is it something that you would see as an opportunity to, again, there's this computer program, the ECCL program at school. Shouldn't there be something parallel? I think my kids at school had something that the police came in and sort of tried to make them alert about those sort of issues.
Definitely, that would be a good idea. Or even in school, I mean, the students themselves could try to become a hacker and try to see what's possible. Really, the experience is really an eye-opener in that field, because you don't believe how much can happen if you have not experienced it on your own.
So it's then a policy issue, right, as well, to say there should be training on learning how the computer works, but there should also be training on how to protect yourself.
Yes, and also what can go wrong, yes.
Right, because sort of what I see in practice sort of on the legal side is that people jump into using devices but actually don't even think about what does it mean. And when you then speak to the CIO of a company that, well, I don't get money for, protective issues or
it can really be dangerous, and then it can cost a lot of money. Just recently in the news there was a case, I think, where again a big company was losing a lot of data because of a hacker attack.
Is it actually telecooperation? Is that sort of security issue an issue?
Of course it is part of that, but for me personally we are not working on that, because at our university we have a whole department for security. So this is security research is done at another department, it's separate. But what I also would like to mention in this context is that people, as you said, use devices without thinking so much about security, and sometimes they really, coming back to the now more GDPR and protection of data issue, not so much security issue, protection of data and protection of privacy, sometimes they are surprisingly open in giving information away. My former husband was a police officer, and he was saying it's surprising how much information they could get on Facebook, because the burglars, they would post proudly on Facebook that they have been doing this or that, and this is, it's surprising.
Interesting. Interesting. Now, one last question about JKU, GKU, your university. In Austria, we have a long history in law and informatics. Professor Traum-Müller was one of the chairs of IRIS, where Erich Schreckhofer is now the chair. Does the university support a department on law and informatics? Or?
They did something, yes. On the one hand, we have a thematic focus area which is called digital transformation. And of course, all the schools that I've mentioned before, especially the technical, social and law, medical not so much, is contributing to this thematic research area. But there's also an organizational unit now. Our rector has founded a couple of years ago the so-called LIT, which stands for Linz Institute of Technology. This is maybe in relation to the MIT, but let's start small. It's currently LIT, LM, next level. And the objective of the LIT, although it's called LIT Institute of Technology, is to focus on interdisciplinary research. It's organized in a way that within this structure of the LIT lab, there is, for example, a virtual factory. And one of those is also a law lab. And a couple of colleagues from the School of Law, as well as a couple of colleagues from the Technical and Natural Sciences, are trying to jointly do research on legal aspects, not so much of informatics specifically, but legal aspects in this digitalization process. So we do not have it anymore like Roland Traum-Müller did, embedded into computer science, but we do have it now embedded into this LIT structure.
Okay. So the university sees room for
Definitely, yes.
So I'd hope sort of that will evolve in a way. Now, let me sort of, because time is going on as well, you are active with DEXA.
Oh, yeah.
And DEXA I do find very interesting. I'll get to that a bit later, but can you sort of explain the audience probably much better than I do what DEXA is? Yes.
DEXA is a conference that was founded over 30 years ago by one of the other pioneering professors of our university, by Roland Wagner. And the idea was to bring together specifically the European research community in the field of databases and expert systems and applications. And the title says it all. So the idea really is to start from basic research in the fields of databases and at that time expert systems, you would probably call those technologies different nowadays, and to be very much application oriented from the very beginning. So the talks that you would usually be able to listen to DEXA are of course very technical on one hand side, but we also always try to open to the different kind of application domains. And what's special about DEXA, it's some kind of multi-conference. So DEXA is the umbrella organization, but within that we have the freedom and opportunity to structure and align different sub-conferences or workshops, you could also call them tracks, and this allows us to really address up-to-date topics. One of the key persons in DEXA chairing one of those subgroups was Roland Tranmöller, because he was chairing a track or a sub-conference on e-government, the e-Govis government. This conference will continue. It's now led by a Hungarian researcher, Andrea Kö. And also in the last years, we are bringing up new topics. So it's not a fixed set of workshops and conferences that takes place. The audience is around 300 researchers, which is for computer science quite a good number. And as I said before, the focus is really on the European research community. So DEXA is held annually in the past, always in Europe. And what we also try to do is we try to host it at the campus of a university, because we really want to promote the exchange of the academia. We do have some practitioners, but it's mainly focused on academia, and this university flair also adds very, very special to DEXA, so it's a great experience to be there.
So expert systems in the legal informatics area played a big role, and Roland Braun-Müller was involved there as well. The big issue was always sort of what are the right data structures, right? So expert systems is nice, but expert system requires that you put your expertise down in sort of data, and then you have logic programming, for example, to express the expert system. You know, we are in a field of complex sort of data. It's not simple, I don't know, relationship databases. So what? And I've seen you've done graph data work as well. Do you see activities in that context, legal graphs being developed, or graph databases suitable for legal information?
Definitely, yes, because we are dealing with, at the best, semi-structured, but usually non-structured information, and therefore those kind of graph structures, those network structures can be suited very well. And the good thing is that nowadays we have powerful analysis tools. In the past we have mastered pretty well the storage and retrieval of those kind of data, but nowadays we are really able to do automated analysis and then to provide even new results, which is then the field of expert systems. So for example, I have myself supervised another PhD thesis on so-called temporal graphs, because the data that you store and collect evolve over time. And we had pretty well elaborated techniques on working on data which are static, but this dynamic, temporally changing dimension was one thing where, again, one of my PhD students developed a framework for analyzing this. We have been applying this in different contexts. One of the applications was analyzing, and this was also quite an interesting project related to the field of e-government that we have been discussing before. We were analyzing the transcripts of the Nationalrat, of the Austrian National Board, how do you say in English? And they are public and they are open data. And what we did was we were extracting graph information from that. We were representing the individuals in this meeting as nodes, and if there had been communication among them in a debate, this was a link. And we had positive or negative connotations to the links according to the sentinel analysis of the messages. So we could also look into the structures, and this is technically possible. And then we were coloring the nodes according to their political parties, and we were just visualizing the graph. And you could see we were analyzing this, as I said, it was a time series study over the past 20 years or so of the protocols, and you could see if two parties are in coalition, they would build a cluster. They had positive agreements. And then if there was a new coalition with different parties, the clusters would suddenly move away and they would disagree. We do not comment on that. We're just visualizing this information, but you could see quite clearly that there's phases of consent, phases of disconsent, and this was quite an interesting experiment.
And would you think it's easy for our audience, in simple terms, to understand what a graph is?
I think the abstraction of a graph is quite easy. To really understand how powerful graph could be as a model is not so easy to understand. But a graph is nodes and arcs in between. So that's it. That's very simple.
So you connect information with...
You connect elements. I would not even call it information.
So
the information is then the result already. Yeah? You have, we could create a graph from the objects here on the table. We could connect the elephant to this piece of paper and to what we have been talking. And the links would say, for example, the semantics that I'm affected to the elephant and you gave it to me as a present. All this could be represented by the graph model.
I think that's interesting that you say that. Just for the audience, there's Neo4j, which is one of those applications, and there is an application they call Arrow. And with Arrow, you can yourself build a simple graph, and those is one of those, visual tools where you can help yourself. So, if in the audience somebody is interested in trying that,
I mean, the difficult part comes then in filling this with semantics, filling this with meaning. I mean, the structure is quite easily described, but then the real power comes from the semantics of the nodes.
But again, I think the point sort of we could make here is sort of don't be afraid, just try.
Definitely, yes, it's fun.
It's fun, yeah.
And I mean, again, don't be afraid. That's probably also the key message.
Now moving on, there is DEXA, then you're involved so many things, that's so difficult. There's IIWAS.
Oh, yes. These are two conferences that I also love very much. IIWAS stands for Information Integration, Web Applications and Services, and MOM stands for Mobile Multimedia.
Okay.
And the origin of these conferences is the following. When I was starting at the university in Linz, I hired one colleague who originally did his PhD in Indonesia. And in the hiring interview, he told me, you're not only hiring me, you're also hiring a conference. Because in Indonesia, I started this conference, now with the objective in this specific field of information integration, web technologies, to connect the European and the Asian research community.
Right.
And I found this very interesting, so I said, okay, welcome with pleasure, but I want to shift the focus a little bit. I want to extend not only web applications, but I want to bring in this mobility aspect we have been talking before. And therefore MOM was founded when he came to us. And now IIWAS and MOM is a combination of two conferences. There are two individual conferences. DEXA is one conference. IIWAS and MOM are two separate ones with different program committees and all those things, but they're always co-located. Yeah. So we have the efficiency of doing the organization on one location. And in that case, since we want to combine Asia and Europe, we're always moving between those two destinations. So one year we are in Europe, next year we are in Asia. This year, in December, we should be in Thailand. Yeah. We don't know, it might be again still a virtual conference, but I think we all gain experience in that, and that's also very, very interesting.
Is there actually, from this conference also, are there results in terms of researchers moving here and down there?
Yes. The conference is definitely a good place to meet, and we just filed in a couple of weeks ago a research proposal to be funded by the European Union, where we also bring in some of our Asia partners. So those conferences are still a fertilizer for ongoing cooperations, definitely, yes.
And sort of, as now there is this Asia relationship, there is your other presidency in this Asia Uninet, which is linked up on the university level, or
yes, the double presidency was not was not planned. It was a coincidence, because actually my Asia Uninet presidency should end of June, right? Because it's always a 2 years period. And then we would have in July the next plenary meeting and the new president would be elected. But because of Corona, we can't meet, and an election remotely is very difficult. You need to discuss, there need to be vice presidents, it needs to be, so it's a complicated process. So we decided to postpone this for 1 year.
Right.
Okay, so this brings me now into the situation of being president of two important organizations. And yes, you're right, Asia Uninet is originating in Austria. One of the chemistry professors from the University of Innsbruck had very good connections to Thailand. And he founded or initiated this kind of cooperation at an academic level. Mm-hmm. So all the partners are universities. The network nowadays has spread to, how many countries? I think something like 30 or 40 countries in Europe and in Asia. And within each country we have different number of member universities. Within Austria, all the universities are member, which is a great achievement. And for Austria, there's also financial support, which is quite special, because the Austrian government for many, many years is trying to promote Austria's relation to specific selected regions in Asia. Mm-hmm. We would, of course, not bring funding money to Japan because they already have a lot of money, or to China. Nowadays, they also have a lot of money. But in our funding program, we, for example, give scholarships for students from Indonesia, mm-hmm. from Vietnam, from Thailand, Cambodia, Pakistan, and those kind of countries. Mm-hmm.
And you're also sort of a kind of ambassador, right? Sort of.
Yes, yeah, that's really something that I love about this network, going there and then talking to the people. And as you mentioned, ambassador, this is also very special, I think, about Asia Uninet. It's an academic network, mm-hmm. but it has strong support at the political level and at the level of international relationships. So whenever we go to one of those countries at an Asia Uninet mission, we usually indicate to the Austrian embassy that we are there. So there's really a lot of support. When I was in Vietnam last year for the interviews, the Austrian ambassador invited us to a jazz concert. So this is also something very, very nice. And vice versa, the embassies or the ambassadors of the member countries which are in Austria once a year invited to a joint dinner. So it's really a strong network, and it's not focused on computer science. Mm-hmm. So it's really a broad network. Yes, even School of Law is involved.
So that means really you're an ambassador also for other fields?
Definitely, yes.
Medicine?
Yeah. Yes, there's a special program for medicine students, for example. They can do their formulatur abroad, their mm-hmm. practical work. There's a lot of research going on in Asia Uninet on environmental studies, because this is of strong mm-hmm. interest for the Asian partners. There is surprisingly a good cooperation in the field of arts between mm-hmm. our arts universities and the arts universities over there. And yeah, business, mm-hmm. all the fields.
And does this result in joint publications as well? Or?
Yes, we are pretty good in joint publications. The hope was that Asia Uninet also would fertilize applications, successful applications at other funding programs, like for example at the European Union they also offer, but we have not been so successful there yet. Right. But the joint publications definitely is a must. We do have every year a good number of PhD students coming to Austria. They publish, and when they come back, this cooperation continues, and we produce an annual report which is quite heavy.
It's heavy, yeah. I've seen quite impressive websites.
Oh yes, yeah. There is a lot of things going on.
But when you say all disciplines, so I need to ask the law as well?
Definitely,
really?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's exchange on the law side as well?
Yeah,
oh, that's good.
Yeah. If you want to have good students from the Asian countries, just contact me. Okay. The deadline was yesterday, so for next year it's too late, but for the next academic year, definitely, yes. Yeah,
so that is really broad.
Yes, yeah.
And how did you get to, as a computer scientist, how did you get into this position?
My predecessor also was from computer science at the university, so there's always a university coordinator, and my predecessor was actually not...
Was your predecessor at Austrian Computer Society as well, right? Or?
Yes.
So I'm sure to
yes,
put the name
true.
there,
yes, yeah. But it's not computer science dominated. Apart from the people being there, it's not.
And do you see potential, in particular when you go back to the ICT sector, do you see potential for joint development? You know, in the legal informatics sector, we have this issue of there are no standards at all. Mm-hmm, there are no APIs, no interfaces, etc. Do you see a potential in such cooperation platforms to get to a certain level of standardization or joint policies or to create a joint interest.
Actually, that's a good idea. I have not been thinking about it because for us in computer science, standards and APIs are essential. Without that, we would duplicate efforts, things would not be able to communicate with each other, so standards are a must. Otherwise, no communication would be able to take place. Nobody at home from the computers could watch this stream if it would be proprietary systems. So for me, standards are so natural that I can't even think about there are other fields without standards. But you're right, maybe we should actively promote this through such kind of networks. And we have not been doing this in the field of standards, but we try also in Asia Uninet to find topics for our plenary meetings where all the different disciplines could contribute. So for example, for the past couple of years, sustainability was one of those topics where everybody could contribute. But I could very well imagine that also the different perspective of standards in the different disciplines could be an interesting topic for the next plenary. I will bring this definitely in the discussion, yes.
And sort of going a bit back to my sort of legal informatics environment. Now you're seeing all these networks. You have so many functions in these organizations. Is legal informatics something that is being seen, or is it just sidelined somewhere? Is it a relevant, division in informatics or section?
It is definitely a relevant division, but not so much from the computer science perspective, I have to be honest. I think there is more interest from the schools of law into bringing informatics into their perspective. I remember very well, again, many years ago, a friend of mine is a lawyer, and he was asking me, is there something, can you connect me to the computer science community? And there was not too many people working on that field from the computer science community. So I think there's definitely a need of creating more visibility, and maybe it really would be a good idea to invite to those kind of meetings even more people from computer science to get them interested in. I'm not aware of any curriculum in Austria where you could specialize in legal informatics.
There's not that I know of, yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
And maybe this might also be the problem might also be that usually those kind of special combinations are the field of the University of Applied Sciences in Austria. But law is one of the few subjects which is only an academic study program. So maybe this is one of the reasons that there is still some...
So there's room to do something.
Yes, definitely,
Which
is good.
Now, tell me, now you have all those functions, is there time for private interest? Do you get off the hook somewhere and relax?
Definitely, yes. I'm pretty fast in relaxing, so I'm not the type of going for vacation for 3 weeks. That's not my style. I usually read my email on my mobile phone regularly, but my work is also part of my hobbies, so I don't suffer from a lack of work-life balance because I would not separate those two. And if I want to relax, what I would like to do is riding the bicycle, going to the outside. I'm interested in music, in architecture. I like to go swimming and all those things. So there's definitely enough time.
But there's still a lot of organizational work, right? With all your functions at
yes,
university.
But the good thing is really I like this work, and if you like something, you are quite good and efficient on doing those things.
So you enjoy it.
So that's definitely.
You enjoy it and have fun.
Yes. And it's also networks, as you said. I mean, networks are somehow penetrating my whole life.
You love traveling, I hope.
Yeah, I do.
Because traveling is...
I'm waiting to be allowed to travel soon, yes.
Good. So, thank you very much for your time. It was extremely interesting to talk to you. As sort of a closing statement, what would you say to the audience that is interested from a legal perspective, sort of going forward?
What would be the take-home message, so
yes.
to say? Yeah, I would say try to become or stay, if you already are, interested in really a broad range of topics.
Right.
I think if we narrow our interest too much, we do become experts, but in a very narrow field. I think broadening your horizon is the key to everything. And this will always be inspiring experiences. When I go to Asia Uninet, I love to be able to talk to researchers from different disciplines, from different cultures. This is so much enriching and actually, if I go to one of my computer science conferences and I have to listen to 10 computer science talks the whole day, talk number 10 is already tiring. But if I go to a conference in the ASA Uninet framework where I hear about different topics, this is much more inspiring. This would be my message, really. Try to attend events like this where you look beyond your own field of expertise and don't be afraid of even experiment with other kind of technologies beyond your field.
That means look into something even if you waste your time because you might have learned whether or not it interests you.
Looking into something is never a waste of time.
Right. Okay, good. But sort of be open and
definitely.
alert.
Yes,
right?
yeah,
Yes. Well, that's a very good message to close this session with. I know you're under time pressure, so
okay.
I think we close here. To our audience, I hope you enjoyed that. We all thank you very much for being with us. It was my pleasure. Yes. And we meet here again at 6:30 for our next 2 workshops, which also will get you some practical experience in legal informatics, I hope.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.